I've got my assembly here for my bike. So here you can see I've got my chain, my handlebars, and my wheels entered. Now, Unleash takes the average cost of the raw materials and turns it into the unit cost for each component that you can see here. And then the unit cost times the quantity equals the total cost per line. And then the total cost of each line adds up to make the total cost of the assembly. So if I go to change my assemble quantity, you'll see that my total cost will then change as well because my quantity has changed, my total cost of each line has changed, and then the total cost of my assembly has doubled. So what will happen if I complete this assembly? Will my overall stock value in Unleash change? No. The value or the cost has simply transferred from my used components into my final assembled product. This means that if you're connected to an accounting system such as Xero, no stock journal will actually be exported for this transaction, as there's no change to your global stock on hand value. Okay, but how does this work when you have sub-assemblies, i.e. assemblies within your assemblies? Well, each layer of assembly will repeat the same process, accumulating the components and transferring the cost to the assembled product, accumulating the components and then transferring the cost to the assembled product. At each point, it will repeat until that cost sits with that final assembled product. Now, a note here, poor practice would be to add your initial component products into Unleashed with no stock value. And why is this? Well, this would feed then into your assembled product, meaning that your costs won't be accurately recorded across your system. Now, in reality, there are other costs that can come into play when you're manufacturing. So how do we factor these into the cost of making our product? And why do we even need to? Well, let's take the example of my bike. And yes, I factored in the costs for the parts, but I haven't actually accounted for the screws that I need to put the bike together. I don't actively track my inventory for these, so I wasn't really thinking about it. I just buy more screws when I run out. And I haven't actually accounted for the cost of labor, which is a pretty significant dent in this production budget. And without these costs feeding into the total cost of the final product, we're actually misrepresenting how much investment it has taken to create our product. And why does this matter? Well, all of your profit and margin calculations in Unleash rely on having the cost, i.e. the stock value of your product in the system. If this isn't accurate or it's unrecorded, you won't be able to see what your projected margin is on your open sales orders, what your profit and margin is from your closed deals, what products are lean in cost but are bringing in the most profit, and what products are a cost drain on your business. These insights are vitally important for making informed strategic decisions that determine the direction of your business, as well as your daily sales decisions. Are my sell prices high enough for this product? Can I actually afford to offer this discount to this customer? Recording your costs accurately from the beginning of the project enables you to see the true margin of sale. Essentially, you can see the full picture of costs for your project. So we need a way of adding in these additional costs into our final product. Now, we could just finish off the assembly and then do a stock adjustment once the assembly is finished, add in some extra value to our assembled product with a bit of a guesstimate of additional costs. However, we would lose visibility of each of these costs in the production process. And if we have multiple layers of assemblies where these costs are included, we might not accurately calculate that true cost. Adding in these additional costs as part of the assembly process itself means you can see which production lines are lean in cost with a high return on investment and which assembly processes are a cost drain on your business. So the best way of including these internal costs, such as labor, consumables, or even costs like excise tax in your assemblies, is to set up a never diminishing product. So I'm going to jump into my never diminishing product that I've created here for my screws. You can see I've got the never diminishing toggle on and I've got the component toggle on because I want to use it in my assembly. Now, never diminishing simply means that it's a product that we don't hold quantity or value for in Unleashed. As you can see, there's no value or quantity showing there, but it can be used on our transactions and we can track it. So if I jump back into my assembly and I add in my bike screws, there we go. And I'm going to say I've used 100 bike screws on this assembly. And each of those screws cost me 20 cents each. So you can see now that that total cost has calculated for that line and is feeding into the total cost of the assembly. Now we can also add labor. So perhaps quantity, you want to measure your labor in hours, or you could have it, the quantity measured in terms of the number of personnel you had on the job. Or you might actually have a different labor product set up per person, especially if each person charges a different rate. So that's what I've done here. I'm going to add in my labor for Gary, who charges out $40 per hour, and he works 2 hours on this project. And then I'm going to add in my labor for Ellie, who charges $42 per hour and worked 3 hours on this project. Now you can see that these total costs are also contributing to the total cost of that assembly, and I'm getting a much more realistic idea of what this project is costing me. And I'm recording my quantity as each hour spent on the project. And because I've added their per hour cost, so the $40 in the unit cost, but because I've added that against the product record, that actually autofills for me when I enter this in here. And a tip as well is recording in your per hour quantities for labor means you can actually analyze which assemblies are taking the most time from your team and work on streamlining those operations. So like I said, you can see how all of these costs feed into the total cost of this assembly, which will ultimately transfer to that final assembled product. The final product stock value will increase, meaning the sale margins when selling that final product will be much more reflective of what's actually going on here. And if you are connected to Xero, you can also set an expense account here, or you can set it against the product record. Now, what this means is that with these added costs that didn't previously exist in our system, the total stock value of our unleashed inventory will actually increase this time when the assembly is completed. So this would send a journal across to your accounting system or to Xero to reflect that change in global stock value. Okay, but what about external costs? Well, as part of my bike assembly process, I actually send it to an external supplier to powder coat. So I would then jump into the supplier cost tab here, pop my supplier in here, and I can add that cost in, and you can see that my total cost jumps up. So this essentially has the same effect as adding in my internal costs. It will increase the total cost of the final product. However, rather than being an internally generated cost, it is attributed to an external supplier. It's kind of like a mini purchase order. It will send a bill across to Xero so that you're not having to manage this separately. And what's incredibly useful about this is, as you'll see later, splitting your external costs from your internal costs means you can actually review them separately in BI Vision and identify how your assemblies are performing with or without those costs included. So why would you use these features for cost recording? Well, it allows you to track your costs accurately throughout the whole project lifecycle so that we can identify activities that are far too expensive. You can also make decisions based off of full picture margins. You can factor in internal expenses at every assembly layer and easily manage your external supplier costs.